I was in the shower. It was like 3 a.m. I was up writing. I was in the shower, and I was like, "Oh shit!" Like really loud because I had a revelation of something I had written about 3 or 4 months ago, and I hadn't really touched it. And it was for book two. I was like surprised I didn't wake my husband up. He's like, "What's going on?" Uh, but it was a key moment, and I used them as like badges of honor because I did it like a lot of authors were like, "Yeah, I had like 30 rejections before someone picked it up." So every rejection was just a step closer. And I had to change the view myself. Like that's when I started changing my worldview of perception. Um, so I could feel how I wanted to feel. Basically, I didn't want to feel down about getting rejection. So I just was like, up, one more stepping stone closer to where I want to be. One more stepping stone closer. One less person that I need to worry about contending with. Like,
first time writer, too many words, too many pages, ridiculous. Like it's so ridiculous,
yeah.
but it's
And
all these.
we tried to cut it down. I had so many people read it, and I'm like, where can I cut it? Can I cut it in half? I spent probably a year trying to figure out how to shrink the book, and there was no way to shrink it without losing a big portion of what was written. I'm like,
Right. Like, and why would you sacrifice quality to fit into
yeah.
somebody else's sort of mandate? Hi, welcome to Indie Authors. Today I have Libby Webber. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, thank you. So as I do with every guest, I start with the bio or the intro. So you live in North Carolina with your husband and two kids. And when you're not writing, you are teaching jujitsu or you're napping, which I can't relate to the first, but I can definitely relate to the second. And you've written Assassin's Legacy. So I'm going to just read off the blurb. So Aaron's legacy is to protect the innocent. Luke's legacy is to lead his fellow assassins into a new generation. When a traitor tries to kill them both, they must gamble lives they've sworn to protect to ensure the survival of their hidden society. But only one of these assassins has the true murderer in their sights, while the other gambles an innocent life. As the body count rises around them, Aaron and Luke must determine which lives are worth saving and which deaths they can justify in order to protect each other and stop the legacy from being destroyed. And there's a trigger, or like a warning, not a trigger warning necessarily, but this book contains topics that some readers may find triggering. Oh, it is a trigger warning. There we go. These
Yeah.
sensitive topics include violence against children, the death of children. Oh, and the death of children. There's also mention, not in detail, of sexual assault and domestic violence. This book is recommended for 18 plus. So I started reading it, and it is action-packed from the word go, like the word go. And
Yes.
yeah, I felt like I wasn't reading. I was watching a movie. It was very cinematic in its description. I guess that's what you were going for.
Yeah, that's how I write. That's how I visualize it. So that's how I write it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And just for those who maybe have read, you've got the second book in the series, right? It's a series? Yes.
It will be out in March.
If you love high action and intrigue and a little bit of like romantic struggle, you're gonna love this definitely. So I first of all, dear viewers, dear listeners, I seem to have this congestion going on, so I apologize if you hear sniffs and little coughs throughout this. But interesting, you always loved writing, but you didn't necessarily love reading. So, because usually those two things go hand in hand. So how how do you reconcile the two?
I I don't know. Actually, I've been doing a lot of like you said, I write like it's a movie. I've always liked the idea of this being a TV show, a movie. Like that's why I wrote it. But I'm more familiar with writing books. But I was talking with a girlfriend the other day, and the very first thing I remember writing is a play.
Interesting.
And so I used to watch a lot of TV and then write plays. So I don't know, maybe one day I'll end up on the screenplay of things, but and then it fell into writing. Fell into reading, and then I fell in love with reading,
Oh,
and then
good.
I
So you
started
did.
writing fan fiction, and now I'm an author. So
That's amazing. So what you saw on TV would inspire your plays, and then fan fiction. So it's like it all kind of ties in
yeah,
to each thing. That's fascinating. Um, well, yeah, there's definitely a very different skill set to writing a play or a screenplay than to writing a novel. So how do you get around? Because I like with for those who haven't read a screenplay at all or a play, um, there's a lot of direction involved, right? So like you're prompting the actors, you're explaining, you're setting the scene. So how how do you sort of avoid that structure, which you do so well in your book? Like, because it would be so tempting to be like, so and so enters from stage right, blah blah.
I have no idea because I've tried to write screenplays now that I went through like writing courses and things, and it's just not as easy as writing a book for me anymore. So
Interesting.
I don't know. I just see it and I in my head and I write it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What fascinates me the most is how everybody um has different images in their heads and how they translate it. So some have these very sort of cinematic, like you, like big, huge things going on, and I can relate to that on a some level because I'm always wondering, like, if my characters were in some sort of TV show, whatever, right? Like, what would the camera direction be like, and that sort of thing. So I do think along those lines for some reason, but I know other people, they just are like a conduit, and it's just coming through. And I guess
I wish.
everybody's brain works so differently, and it's so fascinating to hear how everybody connects with their characters, how they get out on the page. Um, Sorry about all these sniffs. This is bad. So you said the first book was inspired by a short scene that you had to write for a computer class for a substitute teacher. So that was not this book. That was your first, or was it this book?
It was the first book. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
the
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I
Yeah.
was in a computer class. We had a substitute teacher who was a creative writing teacher, and they're like, "Okay, I have to entertain you guys for the next, 45 minutes." It was a college class, and he goes, "Just write a scene," or she said, "Just write a scene set around an emergency room." I was like, "Oh, I can do that. I love writing. This is easy." And it was just one page, handwritten, turned in. Um, and it was devastating. It was a devastating scene. It actually works its way into book two.
Oh,
So,
okay.
and I think what I might do, because that little substitute teacher, if I decided to skip class that day, this may never have been written. Um, I might take that one page that I still have and put it at the back of the book.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about keeping snippets to use later because it's a great thing. Again, like just that sorry, just that collision of worlds, right? You have a sub, here it is, and then you're like, oh yeah, here we go, and it prompts everything. It's amazing. Again, I'm so always blown away by people's stories. So, um, how, excuse me, how did like I'm trying to formulate my thought here about you writing that scene in class because I I distinctly remember many times being in a like we had something called writer's craft. I don't know if you it the same, did you have a course called writer's craft when you were
And no,
in high
well,
school?
no, I did not.
Okay, so our curriculum, I guess, is a little bit different because I'm in Canada, but so we had this course called Writer's Craft, and so it was devoted to creative writing and all of that sort of thing, and teaching, the different elements to a story, and I remember writing, and I remember having done a piece because it was all about these sorts of exercises, right? And the teacher's reaction was less than I had expected. And so years later, I was thinking, as a teacher, like in having attended other writing courses and having gone through university, Like it's a real art to not tearing someone down, instead lifting them up, right? If you see promise. But I'll never forget, because usually like the feedback was pretty good from this teacher, but then that one thing, and I was too immature, emotionally immature, because you're in high school, and
Yeah.
to understand that this was like constructive criticism. Instead, I took it personally, and it was the whole thing, and kind of thing for the listeners. I just flipped the bird to the teacher, and yeah, and so like you can have those moments and be inspired and continue on, or you can have those moments and then be crushed, and then that can maybe stop you from progressing. So that's what I'm talking about, just these moments in life that either push it forward or they don't. So after that experience that you had, did you want to, like, were you thinking about pursuing a writing career?
I kind of already was. So that had to have been my freshman year of college. I was at the community college. And then I went from the community college to our state university. And I was like, there's creative writing. I'm going to take creative writing as my minor because I didn't have it as a major. And I took that story with me. And that's all I worked through my couple semesters there. And then I married my husband, and he's a Marine. We moved to North Carolina, and the school I was able to transfer to had a creative writing degree, which
Amazing.
was perfect. So I then took that, all the experience from my previous school and into this school, and then I wrote a book.
Oh, fantastic. So yeah, you're a pro.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is great. It and because this is a great segue, because your husband's a Marine, it took you about 10 years to finish that first book. So what kept you
Yeah.
coming back to it? Because I mean, one could
Um,
lose interest, right? Like, and be like, oh, I'm just gonna let life take over. But you kept going back. And so why the perseverance, and what made you continue on?
the characters. It's always about the characters for me. They kind of just come to me, and now we're friends, and now we hang out, and
Yeah.
now we talk, and they bother me in the shower, and they bother me while I'm okay. Guys, you don't bother me. Okay. They come and hang out with me in the shower and in the car, and they just tell me their stories, and we have a conversation, and then the books explode from the conversations they have with me.
Isn't it
And so even though
marvelous?
I wasn't writing, I was thinking about them all the time.
It's wonderful, right? Like it's this wonderful, like, additional world that we live in. Um, so you actually finished it as a new mom, which again, like, you have all these sort of challenges that are, that anybody else would maybe say, okay, I have to focus on my kid. Like I don't have the emotional energy to complete this. And you also had just got out of your undergrad program. So you had a baby while you were still finishing your studies?
Um, so I graduated in December, and she was born in July.
Wow. Yeah. But
Yeah.
you were still gestating at the time, like you were creating life at the time. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
It
Oh
was
my
a
gosh.
lot.
Hats off to you. It's I'm always so in awe of women like you, or I guess now they say birthing people, like who have like who are doing all these different things. Like I'm not a very good multitasker. And so like I just am always in awe that people can get this achieved while doing everything else. It's incredible. So you moved to Japan, which I'm totally jealous of because I want to go to Japan so badly. And it was there that you decided to rework the story. So how did it change in that time?
Um, the first version I finished right out of college was very immature, but I was young and I was immature. So it was still young adult. The bad guy was still very one-dimensional. My Aaron's motivations were very selfish. It wasn't a good story. Like it had good bones. It was not really well done. I thought it was awesome, but that's, you know, in retrospect, it was a first draft. And I don't know. I just started to sit down with it and I'm like, oh, why are they doing all of these things? And so then I went and started to rework my side characters, and um, my bad guy switched from the original bad guy to a brand new bad guy. And my original bad guy became my favorite character, which I can't tell you who it was because then it will ruin the ending.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I needed something. So when we got there, the military community is like very hit or miss. In Japan, it's fantastic because we have us. We are on a base, us Americans. Like, this is who you're hanging out with.
It's like a camp, right? Like it does it feel like sort of like a not a summer camp, but I would imagine it would feel like, yeah, an encampment, but not in the negative.
It's like we're on it's like we're on a big college campus, and
right.
we can leave and we do a lot of things out in town, but you live with a bunch of people. And so I was very pregnant with my son when we went over. Like I probably shouldn't have been flying. And after I had him, I was alone. My husband was working. I was alone with the baby and a toddler, and I was like, I need to do something. And so I started writing again because I missed writing. And I took it back out and I started playing with it, and just the experience of having children in that 2-year gap of like, I finished it, I was querying it, it sucked, it's fine. And then having children and rewriting it changed everything about the story. I had to age it up. I understood the motivations of the parents in the book now, which totally impacted the motivation of the entire book. So just life changed the book for me.
I'm just making a note of that because that's such a profound thought. That, you know, it's so interesting because a lot of people who are middle-aged and just starting to write feel like they've missed the boat, right? Like, oh, I'm too old to start now, blah, 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 blah. Even people who are past middle age, who are in the last part of...
They have so much life experience to bring into their characters that the young authors do not.
Yeah. And I'm in the process. I mean, I will be interviewing a very young author, I think tomorrow, as a matter of fact. And he's just, I think he might be 21, like at the most. And he knows. He's like, I am immature, all these things, but he writes it from that perspective, and it's so refreshing, and it's so like he's not pretending to be anything that he's not, and it really works well. And I think that self-awareness is important too in younger writers, because it's like some people have old souls, you get the outlier there, and they can speak on a much deeper level, or maybe unfortunately they've had a lot of trauma or something that has matured them prematurely. So you have to for new writers, you have to realize that your writing is constantly going to change, and it's going to age with you, right? As you have more experiences and things happen. Because
Erin aged so much. Even on this very last pass of the book, before I published it, I aged it up because it was a single person perspective. It was just Erin. I got a lot of good feedback on it, but I knew, like, we were in Japan, and I remember standing in the kitchen. I'm like, I have to write Luke's perspective. Like, the book's not done. I have to go back and write his perspective. Otherwise it doesn't make sense why everyone's so upset at the end. And I looked at Luke, and I'm like, I'm sorry. Cause his story it's not a happy story. You get to the end and you're like, oh, like, dude, you got dealt hard cards. And I had to put that perspective in. I forgot where I was going with that. What were we talking about?
Oh,
sorry.
aging and
aging.
Maturing, and how it reflects in your characters. Yeah.
So my last pass, there's some scenes I never changed because they didn't need to be changed. They were perfect from the original version all the way up, little tweaks. In the very opening chapter, I was like kind of reworking it, and Erin's like, oh no, I'm like a full grown woman. Like, we need to do this. And I'm like, you're sleeping with him? Like, are you sure? I'm like, you were like 17 when I started writing you. Like, are you sure you're sleeping with him? And she's like, I'm sleeping with him. I'm like, okay. And just in those, like, a couple years, I had to age her because I had aged. So yeah, even in your drafts, if you wait long enough, your writing is going to have to mature.
Yeah, and I think that also is a good point, right? Because some people, and it works for some genres like, the romance or things like that, like you don't have to be concerned about um the self-reflection, because certain books are all about certain action, the
Yeah.
spicy life and all of that stuff. But then when you have characters that have these really deep emotions, I'm not saying that that doesn't happen in romance, but in some romance it doesn't happen. Like, let's face it, it's there to just serve a purpose of spicing people's life up. But to let the story marinate for a while, because it will even like change, like your characters will keep talking to you even when you think you're done. And so you've got to kind of let that happen, like let that process occur. Because if you're so quick to publish as soon as you hit, the end, and you're like, okay, I'm sending it out, there could be really great stuff that comes after. And I mean, of course, if you've used like the different types of readers, right? It'll come out in that analysis, or if you work with a developmental editor, it'll come out there. But there's also a lot to be said for writers who just allow themselves a chunk of time before even sending it out for external review. And I think that's great. I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is an important part of it. Like, patience and letting things marinate can be a very productive, even though you're not doing anything, it can be a very productive time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just all the time it happens. Like, I was in the shower. It was like 3 a.m. I was up writing. I was in the shower, and I was like, oh shit, like really loud, because I had a revelation of something I had written about 3 or 4 months ago, and I hadn't really touched it. And it was for book 2. I was like surprised I didn't wake my husband up. He's like, what's going on? But it was a key moment that actually changed a lot of the book, because I didn't want to put it down, but I had to put it down for work. So you'll get those like aha moments when you least expect it.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, by the way, this is happening. I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. And
Yeah.
if you are quick, and I think that's what happened with the very first draft of The Assassin's Legacy, is I finished it and I was like, I've got my degree, I'm ready to do this. And I just sent, like, it was nowhere near ready. Nowhere. And a lot of not just young authors who are new to the game, I want to say, that's the immediate, it's done, somebody take it.
Yeah. And it makes sense that that's your instinct, right? to
Yeah.
like, okay, what else can, like, I'm complete. Here you go. Now you go out and get selected. But no, I think there is great value to sitting, because even writing different scenes. So I'm not out beginning to end. And like, and the viewership and the listenership will know this, because I've said it 100 times, that I have a gazillion projects on the go and none are finished. And you guys are my inspiration. So to get something done. So I am very chaotic and all over the place. And so even the short scenes, so I'll write this one, and then I'm like, okay, you can go to bed for a little while because this other person needs my attention. And so when I go back to the scene, I'm like, oh no, you know what? That's not. And so yeah, like even the little segments, things change or get added to. And so I also love the idea of having children changing the story too. And I mean, it can be having children, it can be going through a different life stage, it can be, but these monumental changes to your life are going to, even if they're not related to the story at all, but they're going to have huge impacts in how you look at your existence and how these emotions, like you understand bigger emotions than you did prior to that specific life change, right? And you can work it into the character. And I think that's beautiful, that having children change the story for you, because you must have had, I mean, unfortunately, I couldn't have kids in the end, but I can imagine, because I'm a writer, that the enormity of the feelings that you have, like this
Yeah.
visceral love that, like, it's like your
And
inside.
protection.
Yeah. So yeah. So anybody who's considering having children, go do it.
It gave such a good depth to the story once I understood that, like, visceral, like, this is everything, and I will do anything for this little being. Because that is the basis of almost all of the relationships in both books, is like this protective love and connection that you don't have it with everyone. So you have it with this one person, and you have got to protect it at all costs because it doesn't come often.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Luke character right off the bat, I already felt so like from that first scene, I was like, that poor guy. Like he just seems so lovely. And like he's like, oh, you want to eat? And I'm like, oh my God, why don't I have a Luke? Like my husband's very kind and sweet, but he's not very good in the kitchen. But so to the reader, to the potential readers, go read this because I just thought, oh dear, I don't think things are gonna go well for this. Like, it's just because the way you set it up and the characters were so alive right from the get-go. Yeah,
I love that. Thank you.
I'm this gig is a wonderful, like what I'm doing right now is so wonderful because I'm being introduced to so many great stories. And I can't wait to take a little, like, I don't want to lose momentum on this, but I can't wait to take a little break so I can finish all these great stories because I'm like, oh, I have to get torn away from this one to start another one. And then I feel the same about the next one. And I want to get back to all the action and everything. And anyway, so you did go through the querying experience and you said that you like it wasn't ready. But how did you handle, like, did you get rejection letters or did you just like not receive any feedback? And how did you handle all that?
I got a couple of rejections, like stock rejections. Some of them were like, if you don't hear from us in 6 weeks, it's a no. I kept a spreadsheet and I used them as like badges of honor because I did it like a lot of authors were like, yeah, I had like, 30 rejections before someone picked it up. So every rejection was just a step closer. And I had to change the view myself. Like that's when I started changing my worldview of perception. So I could feel how I wanted to feel. Basically, I didn't want to feel down about getting rejections. So I just was like, up one more stepping stone closer to where I want to be. One more stepping stone closer. One less person that I need to worry about contending with. Like it was just an easier thought process. So they weren't too terrible.
Yeah. So I love also that sentiment, like basically I'm summarizing, but you control how you feel about what's happening. So I think the rejection can feel very out of control because it's somebody else's opinion of you. And so you can feel very sort of out of control of your situation. But I love that you turned it around. You're like, okay, well, that's good. Thank you. Thank you for that one. I'm going to put it as another notch in the belt. And I think that's a fantastic way to, in life too. I mean, I was talking to someone else about how writing the process and going through all of this changes your life views and it gives you new skills. So instead of being like, oh man, and like letting it chip away at your self-esteem, you're like, yeah, okay, well, so-and-so had 100 rejections before the one came.
Yeah.
But also the fact that now with the self-publishing, it's so empowering. So you can be like, okay, you don't want it? Well, guess what? I can go out and do it myself. So bye. and so you chose that route, right? Like you were like, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to go out and do this. Yeah.
I did. I had an epiphany. I did. Do you know what the Pitch Wars on Twitter?
Yeah.
So on Pitch Wars, I did it for a couple of years. 2 years in a row, I was very close. I was requested for a full, and the second year, same mentor that I was trying to get in with, picked somebody else, and I was like, oh, like I'm like, I'm just gonna email them because either they answer or they don't answer. So I emailed. I was like, why not me? He's like, oh, I'm so glad that you wrote me back. I'm so glad you sent it in again. I love this story. It's fantastic. There's not really a reason I went with the other manuscript. There was just something about it I connected to more. He's like, but your story is great. I'm like, why am I sitting around waiting for somebody in an office, across the country to tell me it's worthy for somebody to read this? And that mentor did that for me. Not even needing to. I was like, I don't need to wait for other people to tell me it's good. I will do it myself. And that was my turning point.
Yeah. And again,
I didn't need a validation. Well, I did, but I didn't really.
But changing the perspective, taking control of the process. And I think that should be like a motivation for so many that you can like, you know what, you guys passed me up. Sorry, I don't want you anymore. Like change the mindset to one of like, oh, I got another rejection too. Like, okay, this is good, whatever. And
Yeah.
yeah, like so much of life is attitude. There's a lot in that fake it till you make it expression.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have faked it until they became very successful. So, I mean, this is just another example of it. Um, but you also pitched to agents.
He did.
Yeah. So how did that go?
Same. I got some good feedback. A lot of the feedback that I got, was it's too long. It's a
Mm,
good story. It's too long. Um, and that was rough because it's a long book. It's 500 pages. Um, I'm known to read that long book. So I know people who look for longer books. Uh, but because I am a first time author, they are less likely to take a chance on me because a publisher is less likely to take a chance on me. So they can't sell the book as easily. So it wasn't that the book wasn't good, it was I was too new. They're like, write another book and bring it to us. You want me to write another book after I just spent 10 years working on this one?
yeah.
So you want me to take another couple years, write another one, wait another few years after that for that one to get published before you'll look at this one. So it could be another 10 years before. No, no, like, no, I don't write short books. I am not a short book writer. I never will be. So
Yeah.
just no.
Exactly. And like as soon as you said long book, I'm thinking of like Edward Rutherford, who is an author. I think he might be British, but I'm probably, I don't know why I don't know this, but I should probably know this fact. But anyway, um, King of the Long Books, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you pick up any of his stuff, he writes more historical sort or like from a historical standpoint, but yeah, like he's known for these huge tomes. And then there was a fantasy writer, and I'll put the name down below because fantastic. First book, enormous. And so I think that I think from what I'm understanding, the more I talk to people who have gone through the query process or even who have been published like through a traditional, maybe smaller press, but there
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of different requirements that they are looking at, which excludes an enormous amount of people. And it's just because at the end of the day, they're a business, right? And they're looking to maximize their profits. And so like what in your experience, first time writer, too many words, too many pages, ridiculous. Like it's so ridiculous,
Yeah.
but it's
And
all these.
we tried to cut it down. I had so many people read it and I'm like, where can I cut it? Can I cut it in half? I spent probably a year trying to figure out how to shrink the book, and there was no way to shrink it without losing a big portion of what was written. And I'm like,
And that
it
whole
wasn't worth it.
right, like, and why would you sacrifice quality to fit into
Yeah.
somebody else's sort of mandate or what they're willing to work with? And again, it's all about, this is supposed to be a creative field, right? Let the creativity
Mm-hmm.
happen. Don't try to box it. And I find right now everything's so boxed, and that's why this self-publishing is so wonderful, because you don't have to live in those boxes. You can have your long story. You can have the people who love the long story and who want to keep reading it. And when it's as action packed and exciting as yours, why wouldn't you want to keep reading it? Right. So doesn't, anyway,
Yeah.
that's a little
Yeah.
bit of a off topic diatribe of mine. But anyway, so um yeah, and it just this left you questioning the benefit of traditional publishing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's true. Like in a day and age where it is so simple to like the process itself of self-publishing is no longer this whole arduous task that it used to be, right? Technology
It's
has improved,
easy.
so easy. So I'm wondering, do you think that self-publishing is going to change the traditional publishing game?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. And if I went to 20 books to 50K conference in Vegas.
Oh yeah, how was it?
So, oh my God, like go. Every self-published author needs to go. Amazing. And there was 2,000 indie authors there.
2000?
Learning from the best. There was there's like 2,000 of us, maybe
Wow.
just under that. But they also had virtual attendees. And on the stage, they had like I forget what it was called, like a mega panel of like 5 authors, like $7 million a year they make self-publishing.
It's amazing. Yeah,
Like,
amazing.
like I can do that. And they're like, yeah, 4 years ago, I wasn't making anything. And they just figured out, like, this is my lane. This is what I write. This is my team. I finally established my team. I outsourced marketing because I hate it. And now they are living in their castles and I want to join them.
Yeah,
So I can do it. You can do it in 4 years. Because I see, but they have a lot of books out too. I don't want people to think like you put 2 books out and make millions. They all have a very big backlog. Like some of them had 8. As soon as you find that reader, the more that they're going to read and then pay.
So sorry, you glitched a little bit. So some of them have you said some of them have like 8, like a big back
80 books out.
Oh, 80. You said 80 books.
80,
boy, oh
yeah.
boy. In 4 years?
No, just over the course. But like
Okay,
it's only like once they figured everything out, it took like 4 years for them to go from making nothing to making, 6-7 figures.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's just building the right team and committing to it and believing in yourself that it's possible.
Committing and believing in yourself. I'm making these notes because I've got to do this for myself. So sorry, I'm working on my first million right here. So committing and
me too.
And what was the last? Oh, believing.
And finding your rhythm. Like once you figure out what works, run with it.
Yeah, figure out what works. That's so genius.
I'm using this like first year, so I've only been published for a year. I'm trying to take like the first 4 years after going to 20 books and treating this like grad school. So I did grad school. It was a lot of work, but I learned a lot in it. And so I'm treating my first 4 years of writing professionally like grad school. I don't expect to make any money. I expect to have a lot of stress and have a lot of mistakes. I expect to have a lot of mistakes and failures and a lot of lessons learned. So I'm taking as many courses as possible, investing where I can afford to for better ad writing, better craft writing, better all of that stuff. So I feel like if I treat the first 4 years as grad school, then you start making more money because now you understand your craft.
And you with all this practice and goal setting, that helps create a successful career. I mean, it's like any other career path, right? Like if you are working in an office, you're going to always be honing your craft, some people have to take, like my husband's just finished taking a whole bunch of courses to keep updated and all of this stuff. So it's necessary, right? Now, if someone didn't have the means yet to take the courses, I have to say that there's a lot of free advice out there on YouTube and things like that. You just have to look up relevant videos or relevant content on the internet until you can actually take courses. But if you can take a course on things that are outside your expertise, so like you said, like writing ads, that's a whole beast unto itself.
People make money just writing ads. Like it's a whole job.
It's a whole job. I used to be a technical writer, right? I made money. I mean, I worked for a corporation, but my salary was paid to me because I wrote instructions. That's it. That's all I did. Step-by-step instructions. So it's there. Go to the experts. That's what if you can. If you can't, at least look up how to, because there are tons of how-to videos out there.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask questions, like find the groups. The 20 books to 50K is on Facebook.
Yep.
So helpful. There's so much resources in there. And they're so kind. The people who run that group and ran the conference, I've never felt better or safer at a conference because
That's
everyone was
lovely.
there for the reason to get better. And all of their conferences and all of their instructionals, they all do it because they were successful and they want to help other people be successful. Uh, Everything's on YouTube.
Yeah.
If you can't make it to the conference, I think on the 10th of December, 2022's conference goes up on YouTube. You can go and watch and take notes. The benefit of going is you get to interact and talk with the panel people and make connections and all of that stuff. So the benefit of going for me was I made a whole lot of connections that I never had before, which in the writing world is very important. So,
and that's another thing that, new writers might not understand is that if you connect, then first of all, you can toss ideas around. But secondly, when you're ready to publish your book, you can have another writer who is already published read it and then give you some feedback and also some quotes that you can already build into your cover, or into the front matter or whatever, or into your marketing. So there is something to be said about networking and connecting, because not only does it make you better in your craft, but it also lends your work credibility. And in self-publishing, it's very difficult to get that validation or credibility, right? Because
there is a lot of not good stuff out there because it is so easy to self-publish that you just hit publish and you didn't take the time to do all of this is a first draft, it needs more love.
Yeah. And some people do the self-publishing because they, want to create a family memoir, right? That they want to publish and then they can have, and so that's
family.
Right. A personal thing. So one of my friends, she took her great aunt's journal and just typed it out and published it, and that was just her project for her family, and it wasn't intended for anybody else. It turned out to be a resource for me because I was writing a story on the same time that her great aunt lived. So but and then there's the hobbyists who just want to write for themselves, and they're like, you know what, if nobody reads it, I don't care, it's out there, it didn't cost me anything really to do this. So and they've got great stories, and it's a different perspective, it's a different voice, but they're not in it for the career, right? And then there's the ones who want to build an audience. They're taking this seriously. They have a goal in mind. So that's the thing. Like, the indie author experience is so varied and so wide. And I've said this before, it's sort of like the Wild West right now out there, like where you've got all sorts of gunslingers. But you're right. Like, if you want to create a career, you don't have to go traditional. You can do this yourself. And I'm following a bunch of really great authors who are all self-published, like before I started this project. And that's kind of why I started this project, because I was like, this is so inspiring, and it's such a different time now.
We live in a very nice time right now if you want to be a writer.
I almost liken it to like Edgar Allan Poe's days, right? Where there weren't necessarily big publishers. Things ran as like a Vella experience in the newspapers, and anybody could get published back then. Like, the presses were like, yeah, okay. Like, the traditional presses hadn't really necessarily started. And so it's almost like we're having this resurgence of that immediate early days, but obviously with a much different environment. And look at all the greats that came out of that time, right?
100%.
These writers who are in the canon of literature, and I'll define that for you guys on a title card for those who don't know what the canon is. But so they're part of the history of literature, and they were indie authors, and it's like mind blowing. So yeah, it's very inspirational. So you spent, because it's always about like, what do you spend money on, what don't you spend money on, especially in the early days, right? So you spent money on the formatting. Did you do a developmental editor?
Yes, I did. I was not pleased with my developmental editor, but I did do it.
Okay.
It was helpful.
Okay, good. So, but what was what caused you not to be pleased? Because I like to have like a because for people who are considering it, like it's good to know, like what should you be expecting? What should you.
Yeah, it was my expectations that they were fantastic. My expectations were above what they were offering,
Okay.
I guess is the best way to put that. Because what they gave me back definitely helped change the story and shape it a little bit better before I published. But I went with a editing house. It was like kind of like a publishing house, but it was an developmental editing place that they had a bunch of editors, and you picked which one you wanted to go through and do it, and then they sent you back mine was like 20 pages of notes. But there wasn't really a follow-up. You can email one follow-up question email in, and that was it. And I didn't like that because I needed more back and forth, especially as a new author. I didn't know what I was supposed to be asking. So I didn't really get the follow-up experience that I wanted. And I guess what I really wanted was someone to bounce ideas off of that I could reach out to when I needed to. So for book 2, I went about it a little bit differently and found myself an amazing developmental editor who we actually have we're from like different sides of the United States, like kind of completely. And we have a common friend
Oh,
that
no
we didn't
way.
even know. Yeah.
That's weird.
A common writing friend, which was absolutely phenomenal. And that was kind of like, yeah, that's it. We're working together. And we have meetings every like 6 weeks of me like, yeah, I know. I need to give you more words. No, I don't know what I'm doing. um, but she asks the hard questions. She says, okay, but what if we did this? And I was like, that's actually really good. Okay. I have to rewrite the entire first 5 chapters if we do that. She's like, yeah, I know. I was
Go
like,
do
but
it.
that's a way better perspective. So thank you. And there I go, rewriting the first 5 chapters.
Yeah. And I think that also is very valuable advice for someone who hasn't gone through the developmental editing stage and they're considering doing it, is to know identify what you don't know, right? So
Yes.
expect to be like, okay, I'm going to ask a ton of questions here. Like, expect that. And if you're someone who wants that continuous feedback, like make sure that you find someone who's going to give it, instead of going with somebody who's like, no, you get one question and that's it. Bye. It might work for some people. Obviously it works for some people because they have that structure. But if you're not that person and you need to bounce or to have these regular meetings, then absolutely ask the questions before you sign a contract or you commit, because
a lot of money.
Yeah. So it's very, very valuable. And also be prepared for those rewrites. Be prepared to have to still go back and rethink things. And oh my gosh, but it's going to make it. Yeah.
I feel like I'm in like the 1% here. I love rewriting and rereading my book. I know a couple people who are like, oh my God, I'm on edit past 5 and I absolutely cannot stand to read this book again. And I'm like, I'll forget that I'm editing. I'll forget that I'm looking for information in book 1 and I'll just keep reading. Like, I love my characters. And I think that's why I sat with it for 10 years, but also it makes it so much easier to do the edits because I don't get tired of reading them. So write something you actually really love, not just something you think other people are going to love.
And sometimes that like you can tell when a writer, so I'm thinking specifically of the ones who have their formula set, right? So the first few are really like, wow, this is great. And as a reader of the same author, you get to know the rhythm and okay, so I'm gonna go back to childhood here, but like the R.L. Stine books, right? Like very formulaic, okay, but you can also tell that he's enthusiastic as a writer, because it's always, there's always a vibe in there. But some, like, and I'm not going to name names, but if there's a formula, they still sell because it's a big name and you're like, oh, so-and-so's book is coming, but you can tell that their heart isn't in it anymore. It's just like, X did Y and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm just filling in the blanks at this point because I've exhausted my resources. And they probably have some sort of contract that says that they have to finish 10
Mm-hmm.
more books, and they're like, I hate this. I have other projects. So I'm not saying it's for lack of talent. I'm saying they're probably being dictated to by the publisher, but you
Yeah.
can tell as a reader where it starts to get really like, oh, you're not enjoying this anymore, are you? So again, you're filled with good advice. Is that write something you love, like that you're really excited about, and keep that as your primary goal, because if you're going to love it, you're going to attract the people who also will love it, and then it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like that you didn't spend time on proofreading, because it's all about balance, right? You have to decide where you're going to spend your time. And so you left that to your beta readers to pick stuff up, right? Like, so I'm assuming
Yes.
you did like a sort of like you ran it through some program and then sent it off, right? But you didn't take the time to do
Yeah.
it.
Well, I did not. I just downloaded Grammarly this time, and I don't even want to put book one in to see what Grammarly would tell me. Um, it's already out there. Doesn't matter. I don't want to know. Storytelling is my thing. Grammar is not my thing. But I got very lucky. I use Beta Books. It's a website that you can pay for, and you can upload your book. You can request beta readers. You can send a link up to your beta readers. They can leave feedback in there, and you can track when they're reading. So, like, I sent out a bunch of links already for book 2, and only one of my beta readers has even accepted it. And so when I'm like, hey, how's book 2 going? They're like, yeah, it's great. I'm like, liar, you haven't even opened it. I can tell what line in the book
That's
you're in. Like,
awesome.
I can tell. Don't. But that allows you to track who's reading, who's not, so you don't have to wonder like how far, like how much longer till I get my book back. It's all right there, and it's super easy to use. One of my beta readers that I found on Beta Books is like phenomenal with grammar. Like, I suck at commas. She's like the comma queen. And so, like,
Everyone
I
needs a
trust
comma
her.
queen. Yeah.
Yeah. I
I have a
trust
comma
her
queen
to
too.
like
Yeah.
fix my commas. And it's fantastic. So I don't have to pay a proofreader to fix my commas. I have a beta reader who enjoys my story, who can help you with that. So find people on your team that has things that you need. Like,
Mhm.
you suck at commas. Find
So
yourself a
yeah,
comma queen. Like,
I'm always like, I can't, and then I just like throw it in or I take it out and I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll just because one of my close
yeah.
friends is a stickler. A stickler. And if I'm like, can you look at this? Like, for sure, she's like, you didn't do this properly. And I'm like, oh, okay, thank you.
That's
So
why I love you. Thank you.
yeah. So the beta books, does that also kind of provide, because I've heard horror stories about beta readers where they've either it went, now this doesn't exist anymore, but for those who in fact it was just a month ago, but there was a library, a database, Z library, where tons, so it was excellent in terms of for academic stuff, right? And but then
Yeah.
it became a pirate site for novels. And so and I was, because I would browse on it because I was like, how is this possible? How is this happening? That, because new stuff would be on there and I'm like, this doesn't bode well for writers who are trying to make money and their stuff is on this pirate site. But a lot of the, like, I did use it for out of date books, like, because I look at a lot of
Yeah.
historical stuff and things that they weren't in print anymore, and it just so happened to be on there. So so I heard horror stories that some of the new indie authors, like, they'd send out their books to beta readers and then they'd find their work on a site like Z Library. So does this website build in that safety factor?
Um, I'm not 100% sure. Like, I just pulled it up to see. As an author, you retain all rights to your work, period. So, like, especially if we already have it on here, if someone then goes and publishes it, it's been published here first.
Right.
So you can kind of track that too. So, like, I can say I posted it here first, and then you could see that somebody else had access to it and they stole it. So, I mean, there's that too.
There's proof. Yeah.
I'd have to dig in a little bit deeper. I was my first book. I think maybe all authors are like this. My first book, I'm like, I have to get it copyrighted at every stage because I don't want anyone to steal my idea. And now I'm like, if someone is going to steal it, then they're going to steal it, whether I'm putting all the boundaries up or not. Like, if a thief wants to get something, they're going to get it. So I try to make sure I'm just not publicly posting things, and I kind of try to vet my beta readers a little bit, and I just don't have a lot of them.
So do you, because no one's actually brought up the copyright aspect of things. So have you copywritten your first?
I did. I did it because of the pirating sites. With Amazon, I'm exclusive with Amazon until March. Then I'm gonna try to go wide with both books. But if they pull your book and they request proof that you own your book, my copyright is just the easiest paperwork to send into them and saying this is my book and it's my copyright, and then they can reinstate it, and so we can get it off and to get it off like pirating sites.
Okay, so it is useful to do that.
Yeah, and I think there's like a time frame. You'd have to look it up. I'm not sure. Like once you publish it, it's best to do it within like X amount of days or months to like kind of cover your own hide. But
yeah,
you don't really need a copyright, from what I understand. I do it just because I would rather be able to hand you a piece of paper than on the back end have to like track a bunch of stuff down.
Yeah.
Makes my life a little easier.
And I think, was that even the right term? Did you copyright it? Was it copywritten? Copywritten? Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird tense because it's not a verb. So, right? Like anyway, see, these are the things that I think about all the time. Just these little.
It's a copy. So I got a copyright on it.
Right.
Think, is how we would say it.
Yeah. So
and I just you go onto the website, you pay like, I don't know, whatever the fee is, you input your manuscript, and then they send you a letter saying,
there you go.
Congratulations.
Done. Yeah. And so again, new writers wouldn't necessarily know that. They wouldn't know about the whole ISBN thing. In Canada, you do not have to pay for your ISBN. In the States, you do.
I'm moving to Canada.
Yeah, I don't know why. You know what? Canada is really great. And if anyone wants to come here, please. Because we're pretty nice, but the weather sucks in most provinces. I mean, we do have lovely summers, spring and fall, but some get hit hard with terrible weather. But anyway, I'm in Ontario for anyone referencing that. So what was I saying? That Canada really, and particularly BC, Ontario, I can't speak for the other provinces, but we have a Council of Arts, and they really try to support artists. So all sorts of different art forms, and writing is one of them. And so you can get grants. Some of my friends have gotten grants to write. You can get writers in residencies. They're offered all over the place where you get paid, and then it's just fantastic. And so I think that's built into the culture here, that they're like, no, we just give you Canadian citizen and ISBN, so don't worry about it, because there is a lot of support. Yeah,
ISBNs are expensive.
Oh, sorry, you're all glitchy. Well, yeah, they're very expensive for you guys, right?
Yeah. I don't remember like the cost off the top of my head, but the cost for one was like really expensive, and it's just cheaper if you buy 10 at a time. And I spent like $200 or something on buying 10. Now I'm going to use them. It gives me more reason to make sure I use them. But yeah, I don't know why. I don't know of any other country that has to pay as much for ISBNs as we do.
The other thing is you don't necessarily need the ISBN if you are do you need the ISBN if you go just with Kindle?
If you go just with Amazon and just with ebook, I'm pretty sure you don't need one.
Yeah.
But if you want to go wide, you need one. And then there's like a battle between like, I don't know. It is easier to get the ISBN and just have an original from the start than trying to attach it later on.
Yeah, makes sense. So back to the proofreader. So this time you said that you would use a proofreader, like for book 2?
Yes, I will use a proofreader because I saved money on my developmental editor. I will spend money on a proofreader. And that is because when I did the audiobook, my narrator, listening to him read directly as I wrote it, I was like, oh, I have some, like I had a couple typos. We found more typos. So I would pay a proofreader this time to save me the headache of going through the manuscript with my narrator and having him re-record things because of mistakes I made.
So let's talk about the fact that because I think you're the first who actually has done an audiobook. So I'd love you to tell the story again about the whole process, because it's and especially the Russian accent one. That
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
So my family does not read. Like my husband doesn't read. My sisters, a couple of my sisters read. I have one sister who like she probably won't even watch it, like even hear my story until it gets on Netflix at this point. So I was like, I want it narrated. And it's more because I wanted to hear my characters come alive. So everyone's like, oh, did you make money off of it? Not yet. Not yet. I'm in it for the long game. I haven't made any money off of it yet. It was more of a present to myself and to my sister. So anyways, I went on ACX. I was like, and for those who don't know, ACX is Audible's publishing for audiobooks. So I made an ACX account. I went on and I read the directions. It was like upload your, little snippets that you want read, put in what kind of narrators you want, and hit go. And so I did that, and the auditions went out. And within a day, I had like 15 auditions. I was like a giddy little kid. I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. So then you have to go through the process of like listening to all of them. The first one I listened to was Michael Neeb, and that is actually my narrator for the book. He'll be the narrator for book 2. And it was perfect. And I'm like, but this is the first one I've ever heard. And is it perfect because it's perfect, or if it's perfect because like I can hear my characters alive? So I was like, I'll wait. I'll listen to all the other ones. The females did not work really well for like the atmosphere of the book. And then I had one guy use a Russian accent, which was, I don't have any Russians in my book. My character's name is Ivan, but he is like a dweeby New Yorker. He is not Russian mobster at all. And it was it was hilarious. And I just couldn't get past it. I learned in that you have to be very specific. I didn't know what I was doing. I just like threw stuff up. For those of you who are going to do narration and you are looking for a narrator, be specific. If you put up a thing, like a script or a scene that you want read, be specific of like what kind of characters they are, what kind of accents they don't have.
No Russians in the
still
story.
Saved somewhere. I could probably pull it up. I think me and my girlfriend listened to it like 7 times before we stopped laughing. And the narrator was great. It was just with my character, it did not work. It's like, I don't know. But I settled with Michael Neeb and reached out to him. It's like, yes, you're perfect. This is what I want. And God, I think that was in like maybe October or November. The book was done and published by December like 26th. It was so fast. So basically you get into negotiations of how much you're spending, what you're doing. He sent me a clip of each main character to make sure I liked the voice that he picked. And then I sent him the book and he started recording it. So you have to read your book a million times. If you do audiobook, you have to listen to your audiobook also a million times. The first time I listened to it, I just enjoyed listening to it. The second time I listened to like each chapter, it was, well, for those of you listening, I've got my Bible of my audiobook, and it's like, let's see, like, and he's Canadian, so he's up in Canada. Like I had to like make notes of where like it was pronounced wrong, or it was the wrong person, or because he's just reading, he's not going back and fully listening to it.
Yeah.
It was a phenomenal experience. I know a lot of people who don't do it that way, though. They just like send it off to a publisher and like they all do that. But I actually enjoyed doing it one-on-one with my narrator, and I'll probably go that route for every book.
What do you know where he's from? And because it would be interesting to see what province he's in.
I don't.
Just because the accent varies so widely, and so it's just I'm always interested to see, because some of us are able to have no accent, and some of us are really accented, and some from the East Coast it's more pronounced and completely different than towards central or Western Canada.
Yeah, but he's phenomenal.
Because that would be pretty cool actually to have someone on who like to interview a
And he's
narrator.
working on his own stuff as well.
Okay. If I ask him if he would be comfortable talking to me, because I think that would be a really great perspective to have him on and to talk about the process from his standpoint. So, and maybe he'll feel some sort of he wants to be patriotic and help a fellow Canadian out.
Possibly.
Um,